All right, everyone. Jay the Great here. Welcome to another episode of the Grayed Out Podcast. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the importance of dialogue, the importance of disagreement, the importance of dissent in our national narrative right now. So I hope you're ready for this. It's going to be an interesting evening. I don't think we'll be on for very long. This is going to be a short episode, but I really do hope tonight you are ready to be grayed out. So let's dive into this. We are not in necessarily unprecedented times right now as far as the nation's history and all the things that are going on. Like, that's definitely not something we've never seen. So we're not there. I have said before, and I'll continue to say again, and you can check out the other episodes. I'll link to the last episode somewhere here or at the end. One of the two will be available to you. In just looking at this is a fresh time as far as the national willingness to dive into the conversation and the agreement kind of wholesale across the board that there needs to be more adept change. We dealt with that in the last episode, kind of how we approach change and some of the tactics that are being taken from either side and how that's not going to help us unless we're really wise. So let's be frank about that and where we are. Tonight, I want to talk about the idea of dialogue, because here's the theme you'll see in some of these videos, especially when I'm dealing with the context of race and race relations, racial repairs, right? How to deal with injustice and how to move forward. That's the objective, right? Moving forward, finding solutions, that is the objective. Unless I'm totally missing something, that's the objective. The problem is when you have two sides of the table, it seems like, well, and actually if you think of it as a round table, you get a lot of sides. There's not really necessarily sides, it's a circle. I know. Maths. Not my thing. Shapes. I get it. Circle doesn't have sides but a lot of angles. How about that? There's a lot of different directions things can come from, even when sitting at a round table. The problem with obviously a sided table, you get two sides. But when we're sitting down at the table, there's going to be a lot of input. And one of the great things about dialogue is that all that input is needed if we're actually going to get ideas that will work to move us forward. Last episode, we dealt with the idea of the words we're using surrounding some of those solutions and how those are probably not going to carry forward if we want feasible, workable solutions. So when you use words like abolish and when you use words like defund, that can sort of hollow out the conversation, because you're going to have people on the other side hearing that going, there's just no way we can do that. That's not reasonable. That's not realistic. And then now you have these sort of explanations that are going on that are like, oh, well, abolish doesn't really mean abolish. And I'm just going to say this. Words are words. Words matter. English matters. English is defined. We have definitions of words. We can't just go around redefining words to fit our needs and uses so that we can say extreme things but not really mean extreme implications. That's just not cool. That's not going to work for the national narrative. That's just something that's got to be I think there's got to be a willingness to set some of those things aside for the sake of winning, for the sake of the victory. You've got to make some strategic moves, and sometimes it is setting, whether it's pride, hurt, whatever it may be, setting aside my desire for sounding super, whether edgy or extreme or absolute in my determination to make something happen. We may have to set that on the back burner in order to make a point about actually making change and gaining ground. So I think that's super important. We've got to deal with that. But tonight, really not about that. Last episode, go watch it. I really appreciate it. And with all these things, let me just take a break just for a second just to say this. Hey, if you're listening, if you're hearing this, if you're watching, I would really appreciate if you would continue to like, share, subscribe if you can. If you're on YouTube, if you're on a podcast, hit those subscribe buttons. If I'm saying anything that makes sense, and who knows, maybe I'm not. Maybe you think, hey, there's that funny, weird guy on his podcast again, just saying crazy stuff. It's entertaining at least. So at least mildly entertaining. Share it with somebody, like it, subscribe. It helps continue to move the content forward. And that's just the way that the algorithms work on social media, YouTube especially. Likes, subscriptions, views, move things forward. And so I am, again, doing this largely for self-help, right? Self-therapy. I'll be honest, tonight I've got a little liquid therapy going with me, and I just kind of to take the edge off, just so I'm enjoying a relaxed evening, just sitting in front of the microphone with all of whoever's listening and just kind of talking about this. So back to where we were. Looking at all of these things that are going on, here's like one of the issues that I continue to call out in politics in general. Continue to call out in our cultural approach to how we resolve things. Largely, we are presented with by the media, we are presented with two options, right? The conservative option and the progressive option. Those are our options. And then within those two options, there seem to be like various camps. I see fewer camps inside the conservative option. I see like fewer mini, I don't know if you want to call them fiefdoms. I'm not sure how I would describe it, but I see fewer of those than I see in the progressive camp. I see a lot of interesting divides and like places, sections in the progressive camp, and I think that's both healthy. I think when you can have internal dialogue and not everything's like solely locked in on a thing, it's probably better. But what I'm seeing is a lot of discourse within both sides, even in those internal factions. There you go, factions, good word. And those internal factions are arguing with one another about who's most right. And there like suddenly becomes a hierarchy of this righteousness by the moral high ground of my perception. And that's a weird place to be, because it just discounts all other opinion as to use a good ministry or biblical term, like a religious term, it's heresy, right? It's heresy against the beliefs that we adhere to. And one of the things as I've been on this journey, I've really kind of discovered this idea of what is now being termed as classic liberalism, and how that's defined, and this idea of defending people's liberty to have opinions and being able to have civil discourse over divided ideas. So I honestly think that's something that we need to consider. Like, how are we having discussions about ideas, being able to disagree, talk through what we read, talk through what we post, talk through. Too much is about, my opinion, your opinion, right, wrong, we disagree, or you're stupid. And those are the things. And it's just like, well, all right. These are the landmines we have to be able to walk through when we're having discourse, especially national discourse about a subject matter that, let's be honest, is both sensitive and emotional, and all of the things that are piled onto what we're dealing with presently. But this is not, it is and is not about what the current narrative is, because we're seeing it play out right now, but it happens throughout politics. And it happens continually because each side has their lockstep ideological adherence, right? Their underpinnings that they have to hold on to. And when you shake those things and you disagree with those things, no matter what place you may be coming from, whether it be a nefarious, right, determined place to destroy those underpinnings, or you're just, I'm not sure I agree with that. Like, you're literally just on a legitimately curious or inquisitive, I want to dialogue about that because I'm not sure how I feel about it. I want more information. I want more fact. What can often be perceived in that moment is that your disagreement is somehow aggression. I think that might be the best way to put it, is the disagreement is seen as aggression toward the belief, and the adherent of that belief as somehow not smart or whatever it might be. And the problem with that is you start looking around for those who will agree with you. You build up that voice around you, right? That's your echo chamber. And everywhere you turn, most everybody agrees with you. And you just keep walking forward in your rightness. But the problem is disagreement is now a target of those people who, for whatever ideological underpinning is going on It's like they just cannot accept the idea that there's disagreement. And if you disagree with my super morally superior argument or stance, you are an ist of some sort, right? You're an ist. Let's just write blank ist. You're an ist of some manner. And this happens from both sides. And it's the weirdest thing, right? Right now, and this is what I feel is possibly going to destroy the conversation and destroy the ability to sit down and dialogue about solutions, is if you disagree, you're a racist. If you disagree with the approach or the thing I'm saying about this, or you don't agree with, or you don't just grab hold of and adopt this theory right now, you're probably a racist. And I'm like, that's a stretch. Disagreement is disagreement. It doesn't have anything to do with race. Maybe the idea needs more vetting. Maybe it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. Like I hate to say this, when you jump on somebody, when someone gets like piled on because they don't maybe agree with the idea of white privilege. Well, maybe it's never been explained in a way that's manageable. It just becomes some like, and it can be sort of this abstract thing that I'm just supposed to deal with, and I get no explanation for. I don't understand what it really means. So I question it, and I question maybe its validity. I'm like, I've never felt privileged. And someone says, well, then you're clearly a racist. Well, no, I need information. Like, these are the ideas that when we have these discussions and things are shut down, clamped down, and pointed out, like, you are now an ist. And it happens both sides. Okay, so let me make sure I'm not just picking on, like, oh, right now. But that is the narrative, like, we're seeing it. Social media is, like, wrought with areas where people are being declared racist. And what's funny is one of the best things I've seen on social media is an old Seinfeld episode, right? Where Kramer goes down to take part in the AIDS walk, and he's like there to support the cause. He's in the middle of it, but he doesn't want to wear a ribbon because he doesn't want to be made to wear a ribbon, right? He doesn't want to be made to wear a ribbon, so he's not going to wear the ribbon. And there's this gang of people that want to make, he's like, so this is the irony of this. He's there in support of the cause, signed up for the walk, registered for the walk. He's there walking in support of like the cause. And yet, because he won't wear the ribbon, suddenly he is basically he gets beat down by this small mob of people. Almost prophetic, to be honest. Because right now it's like, oh, you didn't put a black square on your Instagram? Probably racist. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't put a black square on my Instagram. Because I'm like, okay, silence in my experience when it comes to these kinds of things, like not saying anything is just not a good option. It doesn't help bring forth solutions. And I realize the point of it and all the things, and I get that, but I felt like a lot of people just jumped on the bandwagon and put black square on their Instagram. And I'm not saying like it's a horrible idea or it's not a bad. I'm not saying if you did it, then you're just, but it's like, I think it just kind of went largely misunderstood, and people were just kind of like posting some things, black squares, some other things, and I was just like, I didn't quite get it. So rather than just post a black square, I actually had a podcast episode that came out that day because I was in the midst of like all of these thoughts. I was like trying to use my platform for what I could to say the things that I felt I should say. So, but in that, I knew I risked being labeled something because I didn't do that thing that everyone was doing. But then again, I saw mixed voices inside the black community saying that just seems dumb. Why are they doing that? Who started that? What's it for? What's it going to accomplish? Like we're giving people an easy way out to just have like this passive attempt at saying I'm for it. And so even in the messaging, it's mixed. So there we go. We have these conversations. People disagree. People get labeled. So again, just to make sure I'm not like talking about just this, it happens on the side of conservatism as well. When you say, oh, well, if you don't, we'll just go right back to white privilege. Like if you don't disagree with white privilege, if you don't fall in that, that lockstep belief of white privilege doesn't exist, or you don't believe that, Black Lives Matter is a wholesale political movement bent on the destruction of the United States, and you're in line with them and you think that they have legitimacy, then you're just a Marxist or a socialist or a communist or whatever ist. Again, the ists. And literally it's like, we're going to end up isting each other right into oblivion, and we're going to ist ourselves right out of feasible, real solutions to problems we face as a nation. Because each side wants to have it their way. And I'm just like, what on earth makes people think this is okay? I mean, it gets to the extremes where people like don't agree with what another person's saying, and people are losing their jobs. People are being like cyberbullied out of the potential like income at their workplaces. Like they're being harassed online. People are doxing people. And I'm gonna be honest, like 6 months ago, I didn't know what doxing was until I kept seeing it come up. Like people were doxing people. I'm like, what the heck is this crazy interwebs word, doxing? So I went and looked it up, and I was like, oh crap. Meaning, basically, if you say something that people deem insensitive, that they deem to be hate speech, that they deem to be unworthy of the First Amendment in their opinion, then you're clearly a racist. You're clearly a something phobe. Like, we got to add the phobes, or the ists and the phobes all live in the same village, and they get shunned there. And that's what happens. Social media gets worked up because someone says something, speaks out, and says, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. I don't agree with this. I'm not sure how I feel about this. And suddenly it's like when you whack a beehive, they all come out and they just pile on. And then suddenly you're surrounded by and inundated by this mob that is saying all of these things. And then they're putting your address, your email, your whatever they can find that you have public information out there, they will find it, and then they try to send people to harass you. I guess that's the end game, is they will send people, like the idea is that someone will go to your home and harass you, or know where you live and follow you around and harass you, like where, and then, or they call people's places of work, or they go online and they email and they say horrible things about this person. I saw a guy today on Twitter saying he provoked the Twitter mob, the social media mob, and they got him fired for his pro-Trump position. And I'm like, I thought this was America. I thought we had this thing called the First Amendment that preserved my right to free speech. And then people will say, well, you don't get protected from the consequences of your free speech. I should if you just disagree with me. If I'm advocating some sort of crazed position that actually incites terror, harm, if I'm calling, there are things that are covered in and have been validated by the Supreme Court when it comes to free speech and how those protections work and what is and is not protected. But man, disagreement over things is not, it doesn't fall in those places. Like that still falls under protected speech. Just because we disagree doesn't mean that suddenly I'm the ist or the phobe or the whatever, and the mob should then descend on me and ruin my life, take away my income. That just seems so not normal to me. There has to be a place for dialogue. I mean, doesn't there? Am I just missing the point? And then people say, well, it's hateful speech. Maybe it's just ignorant speech. There is no law against being ignorant or stupid. And that works both ways. There are people on both sides of the aisle that have extreme views that they are free to chant, march about, stand about, do all the things that they want about. They can go out and say it. And I'm the kind of person who will say, you know what? That is protected by the First Amendment. And they can go out and paint a sign, and they can go out and stand on the corner. And as long as that sign doesn't say kill somebody, it doesn't say, hey, fire in a crowded theater, like it's not going to cause harm. And this is what I think is ironic. This is what I really find is ironic in these moments, is when people do this. And there again, this is not a left side, right side problem. There is doxing on both sides, where people will dox people, right? Conservatives, like uber conservatives, will dox super progressives, and vice versa. And this just like, it's nonsense, because here's the bottom line. The irony in this is you like you want free speech until you disagree with it, and then and you realize, right, that you suddenly now have done the thing that you're advocating against. You're putting someone's personal information out there in the hopes, and let's just be honest, come on. The hope is someone will go and either harm them, confront them, and who knows what that will lead to. Someone could get hurt, someone could get killed, and then what? What's the end? Like, what is the end? Is that what we're looking for? More injustice to pile on because we disagreed with that person. So whatever injustice befalls them, they deserve it. Like, what has made our society think that that's okay? And what has made it okay? Like, suddenly we go from the ability to disagree over ideas to a place in our hearts where we have such ownership and identity in these ideas, we are willing to potentially run people toward harm or put people in harm's way just because we don't like what they said. Get them in trouble at work because we don't like what they said. Right? And I mean, and it bleeds into these places where like it's bizarre, the things that have happened to people over this kind of behavior. And it's like, what is it about dissent or disagreement or God forbid, as a kid, a stupid teenager, right? Thank God, I'm going to say this. Thank God that when I was a teenager, there was not social media around. And I bet everyone in my generation, everyone that's my age, we're like, God, thank God it wasn't around. Thank God the worst thing I ever did was probably write something stupid in my diary, right? That no one will ever see. I'm serious. Because who has not had stupid thoughts, done stupid things, taken stupid pictures, and then grown up and go, God, I was a moron when I was a kid. Why did I think that was acceptable? Why did I think that was reasonable? Why did I think that any of that? Like, and I talked about this story 3 or 4 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Might have been last week. It's all a blur, right? We've been on quarantine. We're just not getting, so there you go. But I talked about this. Like, as a kid, you do things, and when you grow up, you look back and go, oh my gosh. I mean, let's talk about 80s fashion choices. I'm looking at you, class of 1990, Panola Valley High. We went through some fashion disasters and look back and go, oh, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? Right? Now, I just want to say, I realize that we've done dumber things and people have done dumber things and said dumber things than just making a fashion choice. But people grow and people change and people realize the error of their ways. And that's where grace comes in. And that's where we need to understand that people can move past a position and redeem themselves. But now we've created such an environment in our society that the mere mention of the fact that you may have said something stupid as a kid, that you as a teenager may have said something insensitive, told an insensitive joke, reposted a tweet or an Instagram picture or liked an Instagram post. That's where it gets really weird. Oh, this person liked this post. Oh my gosh. Like, that's where we've come to, like a like or a retweet or a comment or a whatever it is. And suddenly you're looking at losing career. I'm thinking like the beer guy from the college game 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe it was 2017, like 3 years ago, right? This guy put his funny Venmo password that I need beer money, and people started sending him beer money left and right, and the dude started getting all this money. So he's like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and donate all this money to this children's hospital. And I'm sure you've heard about this story. This is crazy. I wish I could remember the dude's name. I will put it in the notes. I'll link it. There's a bunch of videos about the guy. He did all of this good. And Anheuser-Busch was they were Busch Beer was doing this joint thing with him. They were going to match all these funds. And then they did this article about him. And the reporter dug into the tweets from his teenage years where he had tweeted or retweeted some off-color jokes, some racist jokes, racist jokes. It used to be off-color jokes, inappropriate jokes. Now they're racist jokes. Maybe they are racist. I never saw the jokes. They never put them out there. So, but because he did this, right, because he did this thing, They caught it in their standard background social media scrub. And then they reported it in their article that he did it. After they told him about it, he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm horrified that I would have done that. That's just so dumb. I was just such a stupid kid. I would have. That's just ridiculous. Man, I regret that. That was dumb." Because kids are kids and they don't think that the internet is forever. And I have to talk about to my children. I have children in that age range. I'm talking to them all the time. I'm like, listen, don't be stupid online. My 19-year-old, I'm like constantly telling them, like, whatever you're doing online, your future bosses are going to look at your social media profiles and they're going to examine, like, what kind of character do you have? Like, what kind of person are you? What are you out there doing? Now, I don't even know that I agree with that as a practice. Like, people's personal lives, unless they're off committing crimes, if they want to go off on the weekends and paint themselves in honey and roll in an anthill, I don't care. Like, that's weird, but maybe that's your thing. Okay. Post that all over Instagram. Fine. As long as you show up to work, do your job, you're a respectful employee, and you got time to be there, and you want to work hard and be for what we're doing, whatever. I'd be that kind of boss if, like, people just started badgering me about, we're going to boycott your business. Like, bring it. Just bring it. Try. This is ridiculous. We've reached a place of ridiculous because disagreement is so off-putting to people because they've otherized everyone else to thinking those people who don't think like me, it's like, it's my way or the highway. Such a cliche. Man, such a bad cliche. I'm not even going to edit it out, but I'm to you. That's a horrible cliche. Just got to take that one out of the inventory. So the bottom line is disagreement doesn't make someone your enemy. And how do we start changing minds toward that end? And I really got to think, like, we have to ask ourselves the question, like, am I in disagreement over this person? What about their argument makes me uncomfortable? Like, what about the facts of their argument makes me uncomfortable? And once again, now that leads to a whole other discussion about getting into facts and all those kinds of things. We don't have time for that tonight. I'm trying to keep it at least like 30 minutes. So maybe that's for another episode. But for tonight, asking that question, like, what about that disagreement makes me uncomfortable? What about their facts makes me uncomfortable? You know, and why is my immediate reaction to disagreement one that is visceral? Like, why suddenly, right? And I'm about this, like, I like, we always want to say, like, question everything, but then we got to mean it. And we have to be okay with it. Like, if we're going to question, we have to be okay with it. We have to say that it's all right. And then we have to wade into those disagreements, seeking resolution, solution, or even continue like, well, I don't agree. But I'm not going to try and ruin your life because I disagree with you or you said an insensitive thing that I disagree with. Like, that's just ridiculous because that's what it comes to. Bottom line is then it turns into whatever I disagree with someone about. If I can get enough people to agree that their belief, their thought, their position is immoral in any way, and let's be honest, you can extrapolate immorality in basically any direction you want to go. So we're talking a subjective matrix to then turn someone into the IST or the phobe, right? Because they're asking questions. And it's a ridiculous assertion. And we've got to do better. If we want to get better, we got to do better. We got to be better. We got to treat people with respect. We got to disagree with people with respect. So there we are, back to that same weekly mantra, episodely mantra, every episode. Let's be better. Let's be better in how we disagree with people. Let's ask questions of one another. Let's seek understanding of one another. One of the things I love, tools I used to use when dealing and building teams, is the 7 norms of collaboration, which literally it tells you, like, hold all your ideas with an open hand when you bring them to the table. Like, don't have this personal investment and ownership of any ideas, because if it doesn't get used or doesn't get adopted, then you don't face the personal rejection. It's just an idea. And there may be a better idea and there may be better solutions. And because someone disagrees with yours it's not a personal indictment of you, although it's starting to turn into that. It just is a disagreement. And disagreements can be part of the hard truth, open ears, better people process. So that said, let's be better disagreements. Once again, I would appreciate it if you would, if you're hearing this, if you're seeing this, if you're watching it, if I'm pointing at you, or you're listening to me pointing at the microphone, which, sorry you can't see that, but if you're on the podcast or you're on YouTube or you see it on Facebook, I would really appreciate if you like, share, subscribe, continue to check out the content I'm putting out, and bear with me. I'm continuing to grow in this. I'm working on another podcast project with some people from around the country dealing with kind of a roundtable discussion of racism. I'm really excited about that and where that's going and how that will continue to shape up. And I may leave racism stuff for those discussions and kind of dive back into other issues here, but I'm not sure. I kind of just want to keep following the national narrative. I think I got another episode in me this week, and then we may actually circle back around. Hey, remember COVID-19? Remember the coronavirus? Man, that has fallen off the stage, hasn't it? It's what happened to that thing? So, is it halftime? I kept that's been going around. It's intermission. It's COVID intermission. So that's where we are right now. I don't know. We're gonna find out. I'm gonna dig up some stuff. There'll be a couple of links in this week's description with some videos, people, some instances I've seen online of doxing. Thankfully, a lot of those the addresses and that information has been cut out, but it's hard to watch. It's bizarre to me. It's a bizarre behavior, and I think we got to do the people in the middle got to start speaking more loudly about getting that kind of nonsense stopped, because someone will get hurt and then someone's got to that's that's not good. This is not good. It's not going to solve anything. It's not going to solve anything. That kind of justice isn't justice. That's just revenge. And in some cases, and probably a lot of cases, it's petty revenge, and it won't help anyone feel better or do anything good at all. So I just want to thank you guys again for watching. Again, subscribe, share, right? Hit the bell if you want to know when I'm doing the things that I'm doing. And then you can find me on all the social media, which will be posted in the description. It is every week. I'm on just about every social media platform you can imagine, save for a few, because I just can't manage it all. So thanks again. I'm Jay the Gray. You have been grayed out.